Welcome back everyone. Today we'll be discussing the Yeezy 350 Blue Tint once again. Specifically, we'll be discussing whether you should sell or hold the Yeezy 350 Blue Tint and why that is. To preface this, if you guys enjoy these types of videos regarding the market, reselling, and even info on how to acquire these limited products, be sure to subscribe and enable post notifications. This way you're always 100% updated. Furthermore, for more urgent updates like the recent shock drops we've seen, exclusive access, etc., follow my Twitter, KeithAdam10, and also personals for you. For those who don't know, the Yeezy 350 Blue Tint releases on January 22nd in the US tomorrow, while they actually have already released in Asia, and Europe release does appear to be delayed. Retail will be $230, but some retailers such as Hibbett and Foot Sites still have them listed as $220. Since this is an Adidas product and not Nike, I cannot confirm the exact stock myself, but based on how much stock Asia has received over their release a few weeks ago, proportionally it's looking like these will definitely have healthy stock, like most 350s do, not unexpected, although unlikely as high as the Belugas did, which had the most stock of all Yeezys in 2021. Based on how many foot app wins I've seen thus far, this definitely does indeed seem to be the case. If you're watching this video before the drop, feel free to watch my How to Cop video, otherwise, let's continue. In order to determine if the Yeezy 350 Blue Tint will be a fruitful hold, we will cover an estimated range of what the sneaker will settle at after the drop, and also when shipments come in, essentially all the pairs going into circulation, whether they're expected to increase post-drop or even hypothetically decrease, along with how much specifically over specific periods of time, and finally, what type of margin are we looking at for these in terms of holding. Not the retail to resell initial margin, but rather just the hold margin over X period of time. Kicking it off, let's discuss the estimated range these should be settling at. To begin with, stock for these appears to be quite high, like most 350s are, although not quite as high as the Beluga Reflectives that we recently did see. Demand on these is also very high, in fact much more than the vast majority of 350s based on the current pre-drop sale volume at these current prices, which are pretty impressive, although not quite as high again as what we witnessed on the Yeezy 350 Beluga. The bids also appear to be quite healthy on the large sizes specifically, while the very small sizes I can't say the same unfortunately, and that goes for the pre-sale as well. Overall, for the majority of the common sizes, and especially large sizes, the demand is certainly very notable for a Yeezy 350. This of course makes perfect sense considering the Blue Tints were a very hyped pair back when they first released in 2017. Many will agree this is certainly one of the better Yeezy 350 colorways, and ironically even one of the Adidas developers seems to feel the same way, although of course one single opinion isn't really relevant, of course, just kind of funny. Retail is just slightly higher than usual on these at $230, $10 higher than the typical retail, so this of course will negatively impact your margin. Some sites such as Foot Sites and Hibbett still have them listed as $220, similar to how on the Beluga Reflectives, Snipes had them listed for $220 even though retail was $240. Despite the slightly higher retail, I still do feel that these will maintain profitability in the larger sizes, although with a decent to subpar margin. Focus on the larger sizes as those will certainly be the better of which, of course, but if you do have no tax, you should still be able to make a little bit of lunch money off of the small sizes as well. Now, regarding a specific range, prices have already seen the vast majority of their pre-drop decrease following the Finish Line early access pairs, the Flex app reservation, resellers, general early pairs, and of course the 2017 pairs and Asia pairs that are already in circulation. This leaves the current average at about $312, but of course this is only the pre-drop average. We normally see a notable change post-US drop. This is when we normally experience what I like to refer to as the impulsivity effect. You guys should know what I'm referring to by now, as we discuss this very frequently, yet it almost always occurs to some degree. Regarding the impulsivity effect, if you haven't watched my seller hold videos before, sneaker drops specifically impact human impulsiveness significantly after an individual fails to acquire that desired product due to insufficient supply and too much demand. Therefore, on average, we normally see about a 10% increase of the pre-drop prices post-drop. Now that 10% isn't always the case, such as when a sneaker is slightly overvalued. In fact, most recently, we've been seeing a 5% increase most often, rather than a full 10%. In fact, while on the topic of 350s, the Beluga release was a perfect example of the contrary, where we actually saw a decrease by 5% post-drop for those reasons that I did mention in my seller hold video before the release, and that's precisely what we did end up seeing, as we've discussed in prior videos as well, and we've already hit that negative post-shipment average as well. However, we must also keep in mind that according to Yeezy Mafia, stock on those was over 1 million pairs, which was the highest stock Yeezy in all of 2021, which of course is much more than what these blue tints have, even if the stock for these in general should be relatively high. Now granted, demand on those belugas was higher of course, but the very high pre-sale at that point certainly justified that. Meanwhile, these blue tints pre-drop are currently hovering around where the belugas are right now after the shipments of the mass stock already went into circulation, despite having much less stock and still quite impressive demand. In addition to that, let's also keep in mind that all the Asia pairs are already in circulation, which already caused the market to be notably affected even weeks before today, unlike most releases. Furthermore, let's also not forget that there are already quite a lot of pairs dead stock in circulation from the 2017 pairs as well that people just never decided to sell. Hence, rather than a decrease in price post-drop this time, I'm actually expecting a 5% post-drop increase. Thus, this could potentially leave the average at around $327 tomorrow, with larger sizes still being the best, so focus on those. But again, if you don't have tax, you should still be able to make a little bit of profit off the smaller sizes if you were able to sell before the post-shipment range, of course. So now let's discuss what price it will look like once shipments go out in that 1 to 2 week range. During this period, the vast majority of pairs will be going into circulation, considering this potential post-drop average leaves prices just about $30 shy at what the belugas settle at after they decreased in price post-drop. That certainly leaves a lot of room for these to decrease. Most importantly, although these aren't as highly stocked as the Beluga Reflective 350s, it is still a Yeezy 350 general release nonetheless, and thus should definitely have high stock. Therefore, even though demand is quite impressive with high stock and the post-drop prices potentially being quite high, I would definitely expect a very notable decrease, especially considering how far the belugas dropped. So with our typical range being somewhere between 5 to 15% of a decrease, in this case, I am expecting the higher range which we typically see, which is a 15% decrease. If anything, I think it is possible that after that 2 week range, we may even see them continue to dip a little further, but we'll discuss that later. So with that said, that could potentially leave the post-shipment range at about $277. And again, just to emphasize, I'm expecting the big sizes to perform the best, so try to focus on those. But now that the average price ranges at those points in time are evident, let's discuss whether they're expected to increase from the post-shipment prices or hypothetically decrease. So when it comes to these, we actually have a direct comparison, which is super convenient, considering they literally already released in 2017, like we've seen for quite a few releases in the past, for Yeezys at least, and we have all the data. Although there is additional stock in circulation now, it should still react in somewhat of a proportional manner nonetheless. So initially, with these after the 2017 release, what did we see? Well, not much. If anything, there were even temporary short-term decreases. It wasn't until late 2018, over 1 year later, that we actually began to see consistent, notable increases. So that's definitely not fantastic, but you should also keep in mind before completely counting these out whatsoever as like a 1 out of 10 hold, let's also acknowledge the fact that the post-drop resale back then was very high at the high 300s, whereas the post-drop shipment prices I'm expecting after this release, there is certainly much more room for an increase. Now, in addition to that, as I was discussing earlier, we might potentially see more than that 15% decrease after that 2 week shipment range. This is something that it seems like is somewhat occurring with the Yeezy Belugas, so I do think when it comes to these in the short term, we might actually see these continue to decrease, at least for a little bit until they settle down. So maybe they won't settle at 277, they might continue to go a little lower after that 2 week period. And then similar to that 2017 release, I'm not really expecting anything too fantastic short term. Again, considering these are starting off lower, I do think that there is definitely potential to see a much better increase than what we saw in the 2017 pair, but still nothing fantastic. Now, finally, regarding the hold margin on these, essentially, are these actually going to be worth your time? Although I'm expecting an increase eventually from these within the short term, I'm also expecting the post-drop prices for these before shipments go out to be significantly higher, the price I mentioned earlier. I'm only expecting a minor short-term increase, so it'll likely even take a notable amount of time just to return to those post-drop prices. But okay, that's fair. Maybe not a great short-term hold, we see that on a lot of shoes, but we also like to consider long-term value too, which was an important factor for something like the Jordan 1 patents. Well, we have a great way of measuring that for these, which is quite literally the precise shoe itself. We have all the data from that from the 2017 drop. Well, after almost 4 years, they ended up peaking around $550 before rumors of the re-release started circulating once again. However, we shouldn't expect them to peak at that precise price anymore, considering there is now more stock in circulation inevitably. Although I can't name a precise number, it will certainly be less than $550 that they end up peaking at within a 4-year period, which means at maximum, they can double in post-shipment value in several years, and much more likely to be less than that. So short term isn't ideal for these, while long term is just about average. It's really nothing too crazy. Hence, I have decided to rate these a 4 out of 10 hold, which is below average. It definitely could be worse, and in fact, I might even hold the pair because it's not terrible. 4 out of 10 hold isn't as bad as it gets. We've talked about 2 out of 10 holds, 1 out of 10 holds before in this channel too, so it could be much worse, but it's definitely not ideal in my opinion, margin-wise. So I will be quick selling the vast majority of my pairs, taking advantage of those post-drop prices. Also, just a side note in general, for anyone considering holding any pairs who do have low capital, you should never hold anything in general if you don't have sufficient capital to go for as many drops as possible at your full potential without holding back. If you need money to go for all drops, try to sell these as soon as possible. Let me know what you guys are doing with your pairs down in the comments below. Since this is a discussion at the end of the day, I can't predict the future. This is just my personal analysis based on the data that I've acknowledged. We have a lot of brilliant minds watching the video right now, so I'd implore you to leave your notion down in the comments below. Anyway, that'll conclude it for today. Feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed or perhaps learn a thing or two, subscribe, and enable post notifications. This way you stay 100% updated on all hyped releases. Also, feel free to check out the links in the description below for reliable, fast, residential proxies and pre-verified Nike sneakers or Adidas accounts. Also, feel free to follow Endurance's Twitter for updates on restocks or key giveaways, and the same goes for Gargantua if you want to keep up with the progress or restocks. Last but not least, make sure to follow Keith Adam 10 and Personals for you so you guys stay updated on all urgent info like I was discussing today. With that though, I will see you guys later. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and of course, good luck on this release, or if you already copped, congratulations.